Good morning, this is Madeline.
Good morning everyone, this is Mike.
And we're reading the County Press News and the Society News for Friday the 11th of August. So starting with the Society News. On Tuesday, which is the 15th of August, the dolphins are swimming in Ryde at the waterside pool. The pool is closed to the public whilst the group swims. There are male and female volunteers to help you get in and out of the pool, as well as lifeguards to ensure your safety. To join the dolphins, please call the Society first to notify us of your swimming ability. There are no coffee mornings during August, and the coffee mornings will resume on Wednesday the 6th of September. Also, the knitters and natterers won't be meeting during August, and the group will resume their meetings on Thursday the 7th of September. But the knitters and natterers will be going on an outing on the Thursday the 24th of August to Quor Abbey for lunch. There are still a limited number of available seats on the minibus, and if you're interested in going and would like to join the group, please contact the Society as soon as possible on 522205. And just to remind listeners that the Talking News is available via the Isle of Wight Society for the Blind website and usually available from Friday afternoons. Laura Thompson will be the new Society Centre Administrator. Laura has a wealth of experience, having qualified as an ophthalmic dispenser in 2010, and since that time has worked for a couple of highly regarded and long-established optometrists. And now we have a list of scaffolding news, starting with the Bay area. So there's Lloyd's Bank in Regent Street, Shanklin, 32 Melville Street, Sandown, 23 York Road, Sandown, and new scaffolds at Grubbs, 23A Regent Street, Shanklin, and that's due to go up on the 15th of August. And the Carlson Hotel, Esplanade, Sandown, that's due to go up, not until the 18th of September.
The Cowes area, where the current scaffolds are the development site Castle Street, East Cowes, Royal British Legion, 85 High Street, Cowes, Jam and Sons, Thetis Road, Cowes, Regent House, Market Hill, Cowes, and 5 Mill Hill Road, also Cowes. Current hoardings are 272 to 283 Arctic Road, Cowes, 93 High Street, Cowes. New scaffolds: Cooperative Funeral Care, 8 Ferry Road, East Cowes, due up on the 14th of August. Amory House, 4 to 6 Terminus Road, Cowes, due up the 14th of August. Energy Centre, Castle Street, East Cowes, due up the 19th of August. The new scissor list: Waitrose, Well Street, East Cowes, due up the 14th of August. The footway to be closed, bus stop to be out of action and may be relocated. In the Newport area, we have current scaffolds at Nippert Court, West Street, Newport, Stead & Simpson, 121 High Street, Newport, 2 Chapel Street, Newport, 38 Key Street, Newport. Current hoardings are Home Bargains, Taylor Road, Gunville Road, Carisbrook. New scaffolds at 10 to 12 Lugley Street, Newport, due up the 14th of August. In the Ryde area, current scaffolds are Ryde Street Gallery, 129A High Street, Ryde, St Mary's Church, Ryde, along St Mary's Passage, the Oasis Dental Care, 9 Melville Street, Ryde, Saltmead Cottage, Blewett Avenue, Seaview, 77 George Street, Ryde, and Kimberley, Madeira Road, Seaview.
And just a few more to add to that. 24 Nelson Street Ride, and new scaffolds at so-and-so 30 to 31A Union Street Ride, and that's due up on the 4th of September. And in the West Wight area, current scaffolds, Cornerways, the Broadway, Totland, the King's Head, Quay Street, Yarmouth. And now this week's In Touch extended edition. In August 2016, it became mandatory for health and social care providers to offer patients written information in whichever format they required, whether that be via text, email, braille, audio or large print. The implementation of what is called the Accessible Information Standard has recently been reviewed with mixed results. We put some listeners' experiences of getting required information in a required format from the NHS to Olivia Butterworth from NHS England. And Peter Wight talks to Vanessa Potter about her book Patient H69, about her experience of losing her sight over 72 hours and what it was like learning to see again.
Now we move on to the Isle of Wight County Press for the 11th of August. The headlines are Branston Farm, a death trap report, and a skydive. Branston Farm death trap report. Asbestos, fire and animal disease risks highlighted. Children at Branston Farm were at risk of serious injury and even death due to a catalogue of health and safety failings, according to a damning report leaked to the county press. The inspection of the well-loved 23-acre farm, where generations of island children have had fun school days out, was carried out by Hampshire County Council in October. It found crumbling asbestos-ridden buildings were falling into disrepair, fire safety precautions were not in risk, and people were at risk of contracting Legionella and other diseases transmitted from the animals. Despite being well cared for by tenacious and committed staff, the animals have now been removed. A spokesperson for the Isle of Wight Council, which owns the Arreton facility, said, "At no point were staff, visitors or the public at risk, but according to the inspection report, the public and visitors were placed at significant risk." It said, "There are areas that are not being managed to the required standard and could cause serious injury and or a fatality. There is currently a threat of regulatory action for non-compliance. The new sentencing guidelines would bring significant financial penalties against the Isle of Wight Council and Branston Farm. A focus on making money detracted from the necessary improvements being carried out, it was found. The council maintained the site was safe and met all required standards and had not been subject to any regulatory action. All activities are risk assessed and all visitors undertake a health and safety induction. All visits are supervised by a member of council staff," said the spokesperson. The report represented proactive management by the council to ensure its estate is safe. In the case of Branston, it led to immediate action regarding the site operation and, subsequently, investment to improve the infrastructure. Subsequently, all animals have been removed and rehoused. The inspection found staff and had done their best in difficult circumstances, but had been let down by an historic lack of support. The buildings were found to be clean, the animals in excellent health, a credit to the stockmanship of the staff, and the quality of the teaching high. Opened in 1973 to enable children to learn about farming, Branston Farm, which cost the council £70,000 a year to run, provides school trips, alternative education schemes for pupils excluded from mainstream schools, and short breaks for disabled children. Since September, it has been managed by Island Futures, the Council's skills service for young people, in partnership with Hampshire County Council. The council spokesperson said after many years of low occupancy, there was an exciting and thriving programme for children and their families. Future plans included an outdoor classroom and technical workshops. There have been a growing number of school visits. And the key findings of the report were as follows. Structural collapse of key outbuildings and access to fragile roofs appear to show substantial work is required. The information relating to diseases transmitted from animals to humans was very limited and would indicate health of staff, visitors and public was not properly protected. The farm does not have enough resilience or capacity to deal with the consequences of a significant emergency, including fire, flood or an animal health outbreak. There were gaps at the bottom of the slurry pit where a child might crawl through. There was no suitable risk assessment for fire precautions in the buildings or systems to enable safe evacuation. No assurance could be provided to cover all areas of work where staff and or visitors would come into contact with asbestos. Finally, the staff are very committed. There is a willingness to do the right thing, but they are unclear what the right thing is.
And the second headline, skydive. Proving you are never too old to have fun, 91-year-old Joan Livingston took a leap into the great unknown for charity. Joan, who lives at St Vincent's Care Home in Ryde, successfully completed a skydive, raising more than £1,000 for Age UK Isle of Wight. She said, despite warnings from her doctor, she had a fantastic time completing the skydive. She said, a lot of people think I'm mad. One person even tried to sponsor me to not complete it, but I did it anyway. I'm a Christian and I feel the Holy Spirit told me to do this. I do a lot of mad things, but I just know they will always work out. Joan completed the jump from 8,000 feet at the end of July, and she said, I was terrified, but it was so worthwhile. I am so pleased and thankful, and I would do it again.
A boy has been grabbed in a sex attack. The mother of a teenage boy whose groin was grabbed twice by a Newport man took the attacker's photo and shared it on social media. Her photograph of Saiful Islam prompted a 20-year-old man to come forward saying he had suffered a similar assault at the hands of Islam 18 months earlier. Islam, aged 36, of Shide Road, was warned by island magistrates he could face jail after admitting 2 sexual assault offences, both committed in Newport between January 2016 and June this year. The court was told how the teenager was out shopping with family in June when he went into the Entertainer, where Islam, who he did not know, asked for help finding a toy for his friend's daughter. Islam squeezed past the youth and his hand brushed his groin. The youth felt uncomfortable but thought it might have been an accident, said Anne Smout, prosecuting. However, Islam then deliberately grabbed and momentarily held the boy by his genitals. Islam began talking to the boy's mother and, while her back was turned, he grabbed the boy again before going away. The boy told his mother what had happened, and while they were outside Morrison's they spotted Islam and the mother took his photo, sending it to the police and sharing it on social media. Another victim saw the picture and recognised him as the man who had rubbed his hand over his genitals, and he was reaching for a bag. The court heard Islam had denied the offences but had changed his pleas to guilty 2 weeks before his trial was due to start last Friday. For Islam, Henry Farley said his client was contrite and felt ashamed and remorse. The case was adjourned for sentence until August the 18th.
County Press article inspires fund help for Poppy. Kind-hearted islanders have rallied round to improve the life of a young girl with a rare disability. Following a County Press article about fundraising efforts to buy a mobile hoist for Poppy Dorling, a happy and sociable 13-year-old, yet unable to walk and talk due to a rare genetic disorder, one kind soul posted £200 through the family's letterbox. The Wight Hope charity donated the remaining £175 towards the £900 cost of the hoist, which means Mum and Dad, Alison and Mick Dorling, of Grove Road, Sandown, will be able to take Poppy out on day trips. The lion's share was raised at a garden party organised by family friend Brenda Reeves, and others contacted the County Press with offers of help. Alison said, "We're so grateful. There are some really lovely people out there. I can't believe someone put £200 through the door completely anonymously, so thank you to whoever it was. It will make a huge difference to Poppy. It means we can put the hoist in the car and take her out for the whole day." Currently, if Mick and Alison have to move Poppy, to change her for example, it means physically lifting her. It's not always possible, and the family often find they have to return home, which is adapted for Poppy's needs. Poppy has Rett syndrome, a disorder that affects brain development. It causes severe mental and physical disability and means Poppy is entirely dependent on her carers. Bill Wight from Wight Hope said the small group of friends who founded the charity, which raises money with raffles, coffee mornings and quizzes and donates it to those who need help, were touched by Poppy's plight. "I'm sure she will get a lot of joy from going out. No one likes to be stuck indoors, and we hope it will improve her life," he said.
Shanklin are to lose another high street bank. Barclays Bank in Shanklin will close later this year. The High Street branch will close on November the 17th due to falling customer numbers. The number of counter transactions has dropped from 32,604 to 29,320 in the last financial year, according to Barclays. HSBC and NatWest closed branches in the town earlier this year. Barclays say the number of customers using other ways of banking has increased by 18% since 2012, and only 84 customers use the Shanklin branch exclusively. They have been advised to visit the Ryde or Newport branches instead, or manage their money online. In a letter to customers, Area Director Chris Maynard said, "The decision to close a branch is never an easy one. However, we are finding fewer customers are using the branch to do their everyday banking. Taking into consideration the alternative ways to bank that are available in the area, we have made the decision to close the branch. We are committed to supporting customers and the community during and after the closure." Customer Don Vincent, aged 80, said, "It's sad the way things are going. The number of staff has reduced quite a lot already. There's a line of computer consoles instead. I'll be fine, but it will cause problems for older people who don't often travel into Newport. The cash machine will go too, which will be inconvenient."
Queen Elizabeth expected in Solent. The biggest warship ever built in the UK looks set to turn heads in the Solent next week. The future flagship of the Royal Navy, Queen Elizabeth, is expected to arrive at her home port of Portsmouth next week, with next Friday being the favourite, depending on weather conditions. Queen Elizabeth is on sea trials, and the Royal Navy says final confirmation of her arrival is only expected at relatively short notice. her itinerary dependent upon weather conditions. If Friday is arrival day, she is expected to enter the harbour close to the 9:30 a.m. high tide, when the depth of water is greatest. Extensive dredging has been carried out to accommodate her 11-metre draft. She is expected to be alongside the newly constructed Princess Royal Jetty for about 8 months.
Families seek Samaritans who helped stroke victim. The family of a stroke victim who has lost the power of speech are desperately trying to find out what happened to him after he was found unconscious with a head injury in Ryde. The family went to speak to the Good Samaritans. I'll read that again. The family want to speak to the Good Samaritans who stood by the side of Stephen Humphreys, who lives in the town, and called an ambulance waiting for the paramedics to arrive. On Sunday, his niece, Lily Smith of Newport, posted on Facebook, "Our family are searching for members of the public who saved my disabled uncle's life last night. He was found to be unconscious with a head injury outside New Look in Ryde, and an ambulance was called between 9:30 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. My uncle is a stroke victim who has consequently lost his speech. It's heartbreaking for us. We have no way of finding out how this happened. He is very confused and still under the care of St Mary's Hospital tonight. We would like to personally thank those who stopped for him, stayed with him and called an ambulance. If it wasn't for you, the outcome of this could have been the unthinkable." Speaking to the county press this week, Lily said, "My uncle wasn't attacked as far as we know. We are unsure of whether he had a stroke or a fit. He's still currently being monitored by St Mary's and they're investigating."
Plan signed and sealed. The Pennyfeathers legal agreement has been signed at the 11th hour, paving the way for construction to start next year. After the July 31st deadline passed, the developer, the Pennyfeathers Property Company, was warned the application would be hauled back before the Isle of Wight Council Planning Committee unless the agreement was signed and returned within 7 days. The legal agreement covers multiple elements of the plan for nearly 1,000 homes at Smallbrook near Ryde, including a £2.3 million contribution towards education, substantial sums for sport and the environment, the creation of a new community centre and relocation of Westridge Garage. Outline planning permission was granted almost 2 years ago. The developer's agent, Glenn Hepburn, said the agreement was signed on Wednesday by all 7 landowners. It was due to be signed earlier this year, but Mr Hepburn said the landowners were awaiting assurances from their mortgage company. He accepted the application could have been rejected if it went back to the planning committee, but said, "To come to a different decision after all this work would be perverse and Pennyfeathers would seek costs." He said construction on the new homes was expected to start between June and December next year.
Instructors are driven to distraction. Concerns for the future of the driving tests on the island have been voiced by instructors. As previously reported, PSP Isle of Wight LLP wants to build 7 houses on the site of the existing test centre in Medina Avenue at Newport. And while the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, that's the DVSA, said it would ask to renew its lease for the site, which ends on the 27th of September, instructors are worried the island will be left without a test centre. This week, instructors said a driving test centre sign had appeared outside the Rookley HGV driving test centre, sparking further anger. A Facebook post, which includes a photo of the sign from Mike's School of Motoring, said, "Have pupils been informed officially? No. Have driving instructors? No. This is unreal and totally unacceptable. In a letter to the DVSA, which was also sent to the county press, Julian Cook, an instructor at the school, said, "The news is all over Facebook and our pupils are panicking. We, as instructors, are their first port of call. They're worried their test centre is closing and we can't give them a definite yes because the DVSA are not giving us definite answers. You say, we are seeking an extension to the present test centre lease. We are looking for a suitable new location that meets the criteria set down by the agency. You have known about this for the past 5 years and I find it deplorable. With just 5 weeks to go until the present test centre lease expires, you still have nothing definite to tell us." The DVSA staff are due to attend a meeting at the Riverside Centre later this month to explain changes to the national driving test. Instructors have been told not to raise the test centre issue. DVSA Operations Director Richard Hennessy told the county press, "DVSA is committed to providing a driving test centre on the Isle of Wight and is asking the landlord if the current contract can be extended. In the meantime, we continue to look for a new permanent site on the Isle of Wight."
Ex-teacher gets 3-year ban. A retired teacher was given a 3-year ban by island magistrates after being caught drink driving for the second time in 4 years. Stephen John Carson, 62, of Marsh Green, Bryston, admitted driving at Newbridge near Yarmouth on July the 21st while over the legal limit when he appeared in court last Friday. Carson was spotted by police driving a white Renault van. He gave a reading of 56 milligrams in 100 mils of breath. The legal limit is 35. He had been convicted of drink driving in 2013. For Carson, Oscar Vincent said his client had been at the Royal Solent Yacht Club in Yarmouth, where he had drunk 2 pints, but before he left he foolishly drunk a third. He had felt all right to drive, added Mr. Vincent. Carson was fined £400 with a surcharge of £40 and £85 costs.
Blaze on yacht extinguished by firefighters. Smoke could be seen billowing from the Ryde Harbour on Wednesday after a yacht caught fire. The Coast Guard received an emergency call at around 1:30 p.m, reporting a vessel on fire with 1 person on board. A Coast Guard spokesperson said Bembridge Coast Guard rescue team and the Ryde inshore rescue boat were sent to the scene along with the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. Ryde Harbour Master and Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service were also informed. The spokesman said the person on board the yacht left the boat safely and did not need medical treatment. The fire was extinguished at 3:43 p.m. The Isle of Wight Council said Ryde Harbour staff had worked with Cowes Harbour Commission, Ryde Inshore Rescue and the fire crews to contain the vessel, which had leaked from the Sunseeker. It said it was also working with the boat owner to remove it from the harbour.
School in Gender Gap TV show. A new documentary exploring the impact of how girls and boys are treated at school has been filmed on the Isle of Wight. No More Boys and Girls, Can Our Kids Go Gender Free, produced by Outline Productions for BBC Two, was filmed over 6 weeks at Lanes End Primary School in Cowes. The first of 2 episodes is due to be screened on BBC Two on Wednesday, although a time has yet to be confirmed. A BBC spokesman said, "In this bold, engaging and provocative experiment, Dr. Javed Abdelmonium aims to find out whether stripping away the pink and blue will change the way this class of 7-year-olds think." Taking over one Year 3 class from Lanes End Primary School on the Isle of Wight, Dr. Javed aims to remove all differences in the way boys and girls are treated, to see if after 6 weeks of gender-neutral treatment, he can even out the gaps in their achievements across a range of important psychological measures, from self-confidence to spatial awareness.
Businesses hit by break-ins. Police are investigating whether a string of burglaries in Ventnor town centre are linked. Tramezzini Mediterranean restaurant in the High Street became the latest victim of burglary in the area when a till was stolen at some point between 3 p.m. on Monday and 7:30 a.m. on Tuesday. The till was worth £1,200 and contained several £100s of cash. Masala Bay in Pier Street has also been targeted with 2 burglaries at the restaurant within 2 weeks. On July the 23rd, between midnight and 9 a.m, a till was stolen containing around £250 as well as some bottles of spirits. Then, last Friday at around 12:30 a.m, 4 more bottles of spirits were stolen after the door was forced to gain entry. And another business to be hit in the area was Isle of Vapes in Pier Street. On July the 14th, a burglar entered the shop at about 2:40 a.m. and then returned at 4 a.m, taking around 3,500 bottles of e-liquid after breaking a front window with a brick to gain entry. A police spokesperson said no arrests had been made and investigations were ongoing. Anyone with information can contact police on 101, quoting the reference numbers below, or call Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111.
Damaged bridge needs replacing. Newport Quay Bridge, one of the main access points to the harbour, will have to be replaced after engineers discovered damage levels beyond repair, the county press can reveal. The bridge closed a day after the Isle of Wight festival in June, when critical levels of damage were discovered by inspectors. The council has now confirmed it is beyond repair and it could be a long time before it is replaced. A spokesman said, "It is likely this short section of route, giving vehicle access to the quay via the bridge, will remain closed for some time." The council said drivers would be able to access the quay via Sea Close and pedestrian access would be maintained. However, it confirmed the replacement of the bridge would also be affected by ongoing talks about the harbour with the Marine Management Organisation, which meant legally consultation would be needed before any changes. It added, "One of the proposed changes is to remove the necessity for the road bridge to be lifted in and out of position to allow craft to navigate this section of the harbour. If this revision is accepted, a new static structure would be significantly cheaper, and therefore, in the interests of value for money, the council has decided to wait until a decision has been made on the harbour revision order before undertaking any replacement of the bridge. The timescale on this is not yet clear, but the council is hoping it can be achieved as soon as it is feasibly possible."
50 years for kids to catch up. Disadvantaged children on the island are falling more than 2 years behind their better-off peers. Now politicians and educationalists are calling on the government to intervene. The calls come in the wake of a damning report. The 29-month gap between disadvantaged pupils, those eligible for free school meals, and more affluent children is the largest in the country, according to the Education Policy Institute report. It is a significant problem on the island, where almost 30% of children are living in poverty, according to End Child Poverty figures. The wider the gap, the greater the impact on children's life chances, and the situation looks unlikely to change for 50 years. According to the report, despite significant investment and targeted intervention programs, the gap between disadvantaged 16-year-olds and their peers has only narrowed by 3 months of learning between 2007 and 2016. While there has been some improvement in closing the gap, it is taking far too long. If we carry on at this pace, we will lose at least a further 3 generations before equality of outcomes is realised through our education system. On the current trend, it will take a staggering 50 years before the gap is closed and disadvantaged pupils finally achieve parity with their affluent peers. These inequalities transmit into later life outcomes. Young people from disadvantaged backgrounds are less likely to continue in education. They have lower than average earnings, poorer health, and a greater propensity to become involved in crime. Nationally, disadvantaged pupils are 19 months behind non-disadvantaged peers by the time they are 16. If they have been persistently disadvantaged, that's eligible for free meals for at least 80% of their school life, the gap increases to 24 months. Generally, the gap in educational attainment is smaller in London, the south and the east of the country at 16 to 18 months, and larger in East Midlands, north, and the southwest at around 24 months. It becomes more prominent in rural areas during secondary school. In 2016, tables used in the report, the Isle of Wight was ranked 150th out of 150 local authorities, with just 25% of 16-year-olds achieving the GCSE benchmark. Top was Richmond upon Thames, where 62% achieved this good result. Now, as a result of this report, the Isle of Wight MP Bob Seeley has this to say: "There is a vicious circle on the island of low aspiration, poor educational outcomes, and a lack of good jobs, and we have to break that. The island has had a long-term problem in education, but it is improving. We are determined to help teachers, governors and pupils continue that improvement and ensure pupil premium funding is used to support their progress. I am working with councillors, Hampshire education officers and government to ensure we have the best possible education package, and I have met with education ministers, including the Secretary of State, to discuss it. There is a very strong case for further intervention and support. Education must be at the heart of regenerating our island. I want to see a renaissance in terms of job creation and what we can offer our young people." And then there is an advertisement entitled SOS Meet Campaign Group SOS Save Our Schools, Isle of Wight, is staging a meeting at Key Arts, Newport on Sunday. The meeting is part of a campaign to prevent alleged cuts to school funding on the Isle of Wight. It takes place between noon and 4 p.m. There will be speakers, an arts and crafts zone, live music and magic, and more.
And on the same subject, this is what the Carisbrooke College head, Rob Maddox, says. "All schools strive to do their very best for every single child they teach. However, schools alone are not the panacea to tackle the wider social issues which lead to underachievement. Public services and basic support that families rely on to provide stability so their children can focus on school are being cut. Our children cannot wait 3 generations to close the attainment gap. The government must tackle the causes of disadvantage and poverty, which are the key inhibitors to educational progress. Local authorities and schools are being starved of cash, resulting in closure or cutbacks to essential support for pupils most in need. The fact London schools achieve better with disadvantaged children highlights the difference in funding. Against the backdrop of these challenges, we are all deeply committed to improving the educational outcomes of disadvantaged children, to improve their life chances and break the cycle of underachievement and poverty.
Drink driver crashed into house wall. Hospital receptionist Susan Herwood careered across a pavement in her car and hit the wall of a house while nearly 3 times the drink drive limit. Herwood, aged 59, of Grove Road, Sandown, was told by presiding magistrate Gordon Cooper, "You were lucky you didn't do more damage to the car or the building, or that someone was not walking along the pavement." Anne Smout, prosecuting, told Island magistrates on Tuesday witnesses heard a very loud bang when she drove the silver Mazda across the pavement in Wilkes Road at Sandown. Herwood admitted driving on July the 22nd with a breath alcohol level of 102 micrograms when the legal limit was 35. Her solicitor, Barry Arnott, said she had driven for 30 years and for 27 of those had been a telephonist at St Mary's Hospital. She intended not to drive but decided to move her car a short distance to a safer place, but it went forward instead of backwards. She did hardly any damage. The next day she went round to the occupants of the house and offered to pay for any damage. Who will really suffer is a man who has lost his sight, for whom she is the carer, and who she will now be unable to take out. A probation report said it was the day before Herwood's birthday, and she had eaten nothing on top of hardly eating anything the day before, and drank between 5 and 7 half pints of lager. Herwood was told to do 200 hours unpaid community service work, banned from driving for 26 months, with £85 costs and an £85 surcharge.
Gordon, 81, to kayak 56 miles. An 81-year-old lakeman will take on a 56-mile kayak challenge across Scotland today in memory of his wife. Gordon Ellis, a retired Sandown Grammar High School teacher, will take to the water with his daughter Fran and 5 members of the Canoe Camping Club. They will spend 8 days navigating the Caledonian Canal, Loch Oitche and Loch Ness, starting at Fort William and ending at Inverness. Gordon's late wife, Vivian, who was also a teacher, suffered from Alzheimer's disease, and his sister Sylvia now has Parkinson's. He will raise money for the Mitotherapy Trust to support patients on 8-week treatment trials known as the Bredesen Protocol, which he said had shown promising signs of stabilising and even reversing early cognitive impairment. Gordon said, "In recent years I have seen firsthand the devastating effects of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's can have on sufferers and families. Anything that helps relieve the symptoms can only be for the good. It's important to take a proactive interest in current issues and make the best of one's life and opportunities while one is still able." Gordon only took up kayaking last year, but he is in safe hands as Fran is a qualified canoe kayak coach, and her work was recognised by an invitation to the Queen's Garden Party in May. So far he has raised £680 against a target of £1,000.
And with that, we have to say goodbye to you.
So it's goodbye from Madeline.
And it's goodbye from Mike. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Good morning, everyone. Reading the County Press today. This is Barry.
And Sonara.
And the first letter we have is from Dr. Ian McLennan of Alveston. Amy Mackeldon's opinion piece, How Are We Supposed to Get Around?, struck a resounding chord with me. Like Amy, I have found it gratifying bucking the current trend favouring personal motorised transport over active travel or public transport. Confident that even when the day finally dawned that my wife and I were no longer able to get around by walking or cycling, we'd still have a bus that stopped outside our house. We disposed of our car nearly 4 years ago and have never driven since. Now, thanks to austerity, our local bus service is no more, and to catch a bus into town we now have a 25-minute walk along an unlit country road with no footpath to reach the nearest bus stop. The added irony is that we live in an old railway station, the closure of which was justified by the availability of the omnibus service. Life in the UK is now constructed around the needs of the motorist, the relocation of shopping facilities from the high street to retail parks, one-way road systems, cul-de-sacs, curbside railings, pedestrian crossings and underpasses all conspire to force pedestrians and cyclists to travel further to get around. The overriding priority is to keep the traffic moving. The car industry contributes £34.2 billion to the economy, but road congestion costs the UK an estimated £20 billion per year. The health costs of motoring from declining air quality, lack of exercise, increasing obesity, poor mental health, etc. are incalculable. But it's my choice, I hear the inveterate motorists cry. Yes, but we need to be mindful that, like austerity, this is a political choice, not just a personal one. Human mobility, within reason, is a public good that should make it a priority for public investment. But our preoccupation with the bottom line means a public transport network comprehensive enough to cover all the places people need to travel to is currently deemed unaffordable, so we carry on prioritising the motorist. We scrap the bus service because it's unprofitable, and everyone has a car now, quote, and then, as Amy says, the bus service is inadequate, so I have to get a car. This vicious cycle creates a tragedy of the commons, where free choice, for motorists at least, means everybody gets what nobody wants, a congested road system where there is no viable transport alternative.
A letter from Carl Feeney, pro-Link campaigner and Able Collections Director of Newport. So many reasons for Link. Tunnel supporter sets out case to join island to the mainland. I would like to respond to Bill Moore and Peter Mitchell, CP letters 040817, who had sensible concerns regarding the Isle of Wight fixed link. The subject has been a sensitive one. As the campaign continues, however, the subject is being discussed less emotively and more reasonably by most. There will always be those who are opposed to change, generally because they are uninformed of the details, and that can cause fear. For those who seek change, the onus is on them to inform those that oppose or fear change. ProLink and Able Connections are two separate entities which are able to provide that information, and that information is certainly compelling. Within the next 10 to 15 years, the island's population increase will cause the present cross-Solent transport options to buckle. Ferry capacity is limited, so travelling across the Solent will be compromised severely. Prices will increase further in order to limit demand. The status quo of today will not be maintained. Things are set to get far worse if we do nothing. We need to prepare now for the island's future sustainability. Of course, if there are those who feel they may have a compelling case to oppose a fixed link or even a study, they have equal opportunities to state their case. We believe there needs to be an element that can be a sounding board for ideas to tell us why things cannot be done so solutions can be found. We need sensible questions, so thank you to Bill and Peter and others who helped the project in this way. Unfortunately, at this juncture, it is sometimes very difficult for us to give in-depth answers to specific questions, as the answer can involve many elements of the scheme, which at present the details of which cannot be made public. A due process of first delivering the scheme to the local authority precludes the ability to publish the scheme on public domains. The Isle of Wight Council at present is unaware of the details of the scheme and therefore has a position of neutrality. The Council's position is sensible, pragmatic and correct. No council or MP can state whether they support or oppose a fixed link without the correct information. In order to come to any opinion, the correct information must be sought and produced. ProLink and Able Connections will soon present to the Council a tunnel scheme that has evolved over 2 years. We will ask the Council to support a study into the scheme, but we are not asking them to pay for it. We have established a route which has significant fundamental benefits to both the island and mainland. In order to raise the capital to pay for the construction, there have to be many facets of benefits, not just for those on the island. These benefits are multiple, for instance. First, release of land constraints for housing and business at various mainland locations. Then, provision of material for the potential desired expansion of the port of Southampton. A 24-hour hub of mainland and island-based public and personal transportation. Removal of island-bound vehicles from Portsmouth and Southampton. Production of improved traffic management infrastructure on the island and mainland, including Medina crossings. Removal of large unsightly marshalling areas at 4 valuable waterfront locations. Removal of visual and noise intrusion caused by surface-based traffic. It will literally disappear. Filtering out of harmful fossil fuel-based particulates. Provision of a genuinely viable and efficient island bus service with new rural routes made possible by visitor numbers. Balancing of seasonal traffic influx to the island to relieve congestion via toll pricing structures. The list goes on. All the above and more are able to be achieved through the scheme we have produced. We believe the benefits to the island and Solent region as a whole will be groundbreaking. The ability to have 365-day, 24-hour, immediate, fast and reliable freedom of access will create regeneration of inward investment for tourism and business, as well as better healthcare, education, sporting services, etc. The social welfare benefits of those wishing to visit friends and family will be incomprehensible. Isolation will be removed. It will allow opportunities and aspirations for islanders that are not possible at present. The plan outline has already been shown to mainland authorities that are now keen to progress for their own reasons. Due to the fact this evolved scheme has narrowed down the route to 3 separate portal locations, we believe the studies required will cost considerably less than if no scheme was proposed. The Isle of Wight Transport Infrastructure Task Force has produced its results and clearly states a fixed link study should be undertaken. We shall be asking for the Council's support, in particular, for a study of our proposed scheme, not support of the fixed link per se. It is expected that ProLink and Able Connections will present to the Isle of Wight Council during September, but a firm date has yet to be confirmed by the Council.
We have ex-leaders tied turns from P. Lacey of Ventnor. I read with some surprise of the appointment of ex-councillor Bacon to the chairmanship of the Isle of Wight Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, AONB. I presume this is akin to St Paul's conversion on the road to Damascus, except this appears to be in reverse. It is not 2 years since Mr Bacon supported the erection of an industrial-sized transformer room on the beautiful coastal Flowers Brook, transformed by the Ventnor Enhancement Group. He was seemingly unmoved by the desecration of a rural beauty spot. He was equally dismissive of the fact that the blinding night lighting and excessive noise levels in an otherwise peaceful area accompanying the erection of a huge wave-piercing turbines would run a coach and horses through the island's commitment to erase light pollution in the form of a dark skies policy. His ruling group overrode the then objections by the AONB. Both the island Conservative and Independent parties supported the establishment of the wave turbine experiment off St Catherine's Point to the tune of more than £1.5 million. Probably more if permanent officers' time is factored in. We have a government committed to renewable energy, but even they were not prepared to subsidise projects which had bankrupted some companies and which industry leaders like Siemens had abandoned as totally impractical and financially unsustainable. Were those unnamed who appointed Mr Bacon unaware of his publicly expressed sentiments? Did he forget to mention them at interview, presuming there was one, or is it a case of selective amnesia?
Nationalise ferries to stop this rip-off, from John Weeks of Culborn. Last Friday, my daughter-in-law paid £246 to travel with a small car from Portsmouth to Fishbourne. The distance from Portsmouth to the island is 7 miles. At £35 per mile, is the Solent the most expensive stretch of water in the world? For what she paid, my daughter-in-law could probably have crossed the Channel or flown to New York without a car. I'm aware this week is Cows Week, but to quadruple prices at the most popular times is to exploit tourists and islanders. The fuel costs and wages bill remain the same for each voyage. The operators can do this because the two companies exercise a duopoly on the main 3 routes and can charge what they please. It is no coincidence there is no significant difference in the rates charged for the 3 routes, and therefore no effective price competition. It is time the ferries to the island were regarded as an extension to the road system and nationalised, or they could at least be forced to publish a list of standard charges with discounts for islanders. Our last MP did nothing to resolve this rip-off. What will our new MP do?
And a letter from Christopher Bland of Shorewell. Woodnut undercut me. Alan Stroud's article on the 1968 Bembridge Harbour scandal was excellent and completely accurate. I write as the overbidder of £35,000 only to lose to the island MP and the chairman of the council, who were supporting a bid of £12,000 less than mine. The harbour last changed hands for a 7-figure sum, and I can certainly see the temptation for the present owner to extract an income from the surrounding land. That would be fine, but only so long as enough money is spent so the harbour can be kept as a viable proposition for sailing and on-water activities. To retain the necessary quality of the harbour will always cost money, primarily because when the embankment was constructed to support the railway in the late 19th century, Brading Harbour ceased to scour Bembridge Harbour as the water went out to the sea, and thus the silting up process began. There is therefore an essential requirement for annual dredging, and this must be funded by income from ongoing harbour activities, for example, mooring and berthing fees. Mr Woodnut's interview with the BBC's Nationwide was superb entertainment. I watched it at the time, and among many unforgettable gems, the undoubted highlight was when Mrs Woodnut came into view carrying a genteel tray of drinks, just as her husband snatched away the interviewer's microphone and shouted, "For God's sake, don't give him a drink."
And letter of the week, meter made to take back time. And this is from Christopher Offer of Brading. I wonder if anyone else has noticed how some island parking pay and display machines just, ever so slightly, don't give you the full parking time that you have paid for. Today, Monday, I parked in Quay Street, Newport, and purchased a half-hour ticket from the machine outside numbers 14 to 16. It was exactly 10 a.m, according to my wristwatch and mobile phone, time automatically updated by the mobile network. The news had just started on the car radio as I switched off the engine to go to the adjacent machine. The half-hour ticket I purchased, however, stated the time of purchase was 9:57 a.m. and therefore expired at 10:27 a.m., not 10:30 a.m. as was my entitlement. Fortunately, my business in Key Street was finished before 10:27 a.m. and I then drove round to Bile Street. This time, the half-hour ticket I purchased from the machine opposite the County Press Office stated that the time of purchase was 12:25 a.m. and that it therefore expired at 10:55 a.m. The time at which I purchased the ticket was actually 10:29 a.m, as verified this time not only by my watch and mobile phone, but also the clock on the wall in reception of the County Press offices. And who is going to challenge that? So in the first case, I was sold short by 10%. On the second occasion, by more than 13%. I wonder what trading standards view would be of a shop which sold its customers short by those sort of amounts, or perhaps a fuel station which delivered more than 100 ml too little fuel from its pumps for each litre it charged its customers for. Or doesn't it count if it's the local authority short-selling its customers?
And from Mark Groundsell in Cowes, scheme non-viable. Bill Moore rightly comments on Island Road capacity with respect to the suggested fixed link road tunnels. One ventures to ask the proponents who depict two tunnels with 2 lanes in each. This amounts to twice the cost. A 3.5 metre road lane has a capacity of around 3,000 vehicles per hour. The current demand reported 5,700 vehicles daily, total for both directions, would see only modest traffic flows. If this were to be a PFI project, then funding would likely attract toll fares comparable to ferry charges. See my letter, CP November 2013. Thus the traffic demand would hardly be likely to increase. If the fixed link would be cited to favour the East Wight, then there could be a case for retaining the Yarmouth ferry service, reducing fixed link traffic further. This would make a fixed link scheme even less viable.
And on to looking back. 100 years ago, on August the 11th, 1917, the County Press announced a price increase to 1.5 pence. Old pence too. This was owing to the greatly increased cost of paper and the difficulty of obtaining fresh supplies at any price. The newspaper argued that most other local papers across the country had taken this step long ago, and for a while the cost of production had been exceeding the amount made in sales. And also on the same day, report of the island held a meeting to discuss the future visit of the Marquess of Carisbrooke. The Marquess and Marchioness had not visited the island since their marriage, and the meeting was held with the purpose of arranging a reception and the presentation of an address to the couple. Colonel Craddock said it was suggested the people of the Isle of Wight would like a public welcome. Canon Clement Smith seconded the resolution, which was carried unanimously.
And 75 years ago, August the 8th, 1942, the newly formed Poultry and Rabbit Club showcased its good work at a successful show at the market in Newport. There was a large number of entrants, particularly rabbits, and the judges praised their high quality. Club President Lady Baring congratulated the exhibitors for the good work augmenting the nation's meat supply through their breeding of rabbits. And also the Ride Salvage Drive, although launched with great haste, was most successful and is believed the collection far exceeded the target of 50 tonnes. During the first week, as many as 10 lorries were used for several hours a day. The town was divided into 6 sectors and a day appointed for the removal of salvage from each.
50 years ago, on August the 12th, 1967, I'll skip the first one, teenage royals were the draw at Cowes Week when spectators looked out for 19-year-old Prince Charles and 17-year-old Princess Anne, who attended the annual regatta.
And 25 years ago, August the 7th, 1992, locals were drafted in as Lady Chatterley extras with several islanders to feature prominently in film maker Ken Russell's mini-series due to be screened the following autumn. The storyline called for an exotic location similar to the French Riviera. However, the budget would only stretch as far as the island Undercliff. Bad weather on the island almost resulted in Ken rewriting all the scenes so they could take place indoors. However, the sunshine prevailed in the end. And 2 ferry operators showed interest in starting new services to the island. It was claimed at a Newport public meeting. A number of businessmen, including the Isle of Wight Chamber of Commerce and Industry, were eager for a fixed link to the mainland to boost the island's economy. There were also major fears about the damaging effect on tourism of visitors having long waits to catch car ferries. County Councillor Alan Fulwood told the meeting he recently had to wait 7 hours to get the ferry from Portsmouth to Fishbourne, and he knew of some people who had waited 11 hours. Whitelink dismissed the 11-hour wait suggestion as unfounded and stressed Mr. Fulwood had arrived 9 hours prior to his 11 p.m. booking on a Saturday.
10 years ago, around 60 Travelodge guests were forced to move to other accommodation on Sunday night when the generator, which had been powering the hotel since it opened, failed. 36 of the 64 rooms were in use at the time, and all the guests had to pack their bags and relocate to other hotels across the island. The hotel was reopened by 6 p.m. the following day and was supplied with mains power by August the 17th. Oh, that's a whole week. And there was a rising tide of objections to hotel plans for the harbour. After it was announced developers were planning a luxury hotel in Bembridge. The application for the 69-bed hotel and car park on the current Marina car park, adjacent to 2 existing apartment blocks, included 3 conference rooms, a rooftop splash pool, public toilets, and showers for yachtsmen's use. However, within days of the application being submitted, residents from the flats built in the 1970s said the hotel was too big. They argued the design did not fit the nature of the existing neighbourhood. And 10 years ago, again, a shark caught on the doorstep of celebrity chef Rick Stein's famous seafood restaurant and prepared by a former colleague was snapped up by diners at an island hotel. Jose Graziosi said his Goan curry, which was based around the poor beagle shark meat, was going down a storm at the George Hotel Yarmouth, where more than 80 portions were sold. The 5-foot fish was caught off the coast of Cornwall and brought in by Phillips Fine Foods of Northwood.
And now we have Wight Memories. War effort embodied in Winifred. The island took every opportunity to celebrate just about anything after the grim reality of the First World War. Locally, one group who suffered tremendous loss was the Isle of Wight Rifles at Gallipoli. The roll call of the dead and injured illustrating war is no discriminator of rich and poor. Another illustration was the make-up of the band of brothers, the Isle of Wight Nuts, forged together by war to make the best of it. The disparate nature of those who gave their lives is illustrated by the memorial stone to former pupils of my old school at Barton, who were killed in the same conflict as the son of the wealthy benefactor Sir Charles Seeley. After the end of that great, awful conflict, the community which had lost its sons celebrated a bright future and took the opportunity to do so using one of the tools of war, a tank called Winifred. In September 1919, there was a grand ceremony held in Newport's Victoria Recreation Ground with the official handing over to the town of a tank with an interesting tale. From October 1917, every town with a population of more than 10,000 was asked to send a weekly sum from its area equal to 10 shillings 50p per head. By January 1919, the county press reported Newport raised a staggering £408,593, an average of almost £6,000 a week. It was raised by numerous small groups, including the Women's Association, the St Paul's Association, the James Thomas and Isle of Wight Central Railway Association, and the local Oddfellows. Many schools too helped contribute, including those at Shorewell, Chillerton and Arreton. The headmaster of Barton School, Skipper Ousley, was later awarded the MBE for being the leading organiser of this fundraising task. The tank had first to be brought from the mainland, not without difficulties. Once here, it clanked its way from Cowes at around 2 miles per hour to Newport, where it descended Honey Hill. It then made its way to Key Street, where for the rest of the morning fascinated crowds made up of numerous schoolchildren gazed at it in awe. It should be remembered, in the First World War, tanks were a new innovation, and so quite a novelty to the public. In the afternoon, the tank was driven up Carisbrook Mall and down Recreation Ground Road, where the bridge in the road leading to the ground had to be strengthened to enable it to cross the Lukeley stream before turning into Priory Fields. Eventually it made its way to its final resting place in the far corner of the ground. The tank was 26 feet long, 13 feet wide and more than 9 feet tall, weighing around 27 tons. It had seen action at the Battle of Cambrai in November and December 1917. Cambrai was an important town as it contained a strategic railhead, and in front of it lay the strong Hindenburg Line, a defensive position in which the Germans placed great faith. 476 tanks, including Winifred, advanced on a 10-kilometre front at enemy positions, and the Germans were driven back. 8,000 prisoners were taken and a great deal of enemy armaments captured. On the day Winifred was presented to Newport, bullet holes could still be seen in its armour. Local dignitaries were told by the army personnel attending that tanks of that type were always known as either male or female, and their tank was the smaller Mark IV female that carried 6 Lewis guns and 24,000 rounds of ammunition. The larger tanks were used to demolish concrete defences. When Lieutenant Roberts performed the handing over ceremony, smashing a bottle of champagne on the steel, he named her Winifred, after the Lady Mayoress, Mrs. Winifred Witcher. Among the other civic leaders in attendance were Mayor Witcher, Mr. Milgate, Councillors Quinton, Rugg, Deacon, Wadham, A.E. Harvey and Skipper Ousley. The Boy Scouts formed a guard of honour, while the Girl Guides and the St Paul's and Town Band added to the pageant. When I made inquiries of people who might have seen the tank, former Barton school pupil, sadly now the late Peter Misch, recalled as a young boy sitting on it and watching a first-class cricket match at the Rec between Hampshire and Middlesex in 1938. It was certainly still there too after the Second World War, but readers may know when it was eventually taken away and where to.
And that was written by Brian Greening, who's got a lot of memories of early Newport. On to My View by Matthew Chatfield. Railroaded into pointless conversation. Summer's in full swing and the relatives are incoming. If you've lived on the island long enough, you'll know what I mean. You may relish the prospect or dread it, but chances are you'll be having visitors round about now, and who can blame them? The mainland is great for shopping centres, big roads, mountains, traffic jams, and other exotic pleasures. But most of us island dwellers are happy enough to forego the joys of the North Island in return for the simple delights of living by the beach. And in the summer, visitors want to come and enjoy a bit of that too. When those fair weather relatives roll up in their fancy cars with the red funnel purple tags still dangling from their mirror, the first thing to endure is the discussion about roads. I've noticed that whenever a group of people meet on the mainland after a car journey of any distance, there is a ceremonial conversation about which way you came. Usually an older man will inquire of a younger driver, and then, on receiving an answer, expound on the way they should have gone. This involves a lot of road numbers. So, for example, the inquisitor could ask, did you go up the A3M or the M3? And what about the M40? Did you cross it or go as far as the A43? Are you paying attention? Do I see you nodding off there? What's that? You just want to have a wee and a nice cup of tea? Honestly, you young folk have no stamina. How do you think we managed before the Hindhead Tunnel? What these mainlanders don't realise is, on the island, we don't usually have this conversation, and when we do, it's different. So at an island gathering, it would be bizarre to ask how someone got there. The answer for pretty much everyone would be, well, I went out to Newport Road, drove for about 20 minutes, and now here I am. Of course, we can offer some local comment on the endless enigma of the best way to get to Chale, but the bottom line is there's not much conversation to be had in island route juggling. It's another great feature of island living that we really don't need to waste our time and brain power bothering with such tediousness. There is usually only one way to drive between any two places, and if not, it probably made a difference of 5 minutes. What's more, and this is a shibboleth that will pick out a recent incomer every time, nobody talks about road numbers. Can you honestly say you know the difference between the A3055 and the A3054? Or care? Of course not. But you can be sure you know where the military road is. So next time some motorway cruiser rolls up to visit and tries to engage you in road number discussions, just say no. Then ask them what they think about the floating bridge.
And we also have an article by Jake Harrison, New Build Blighting Our Beautiful Island. With the incredible influx of new built housing developments encroaching on acres of our precious island, there are quite a few questions that need to be answered. Are we now heading into a future of pop-up island housing? Or will these timber-framed properties prove to be a costly disaster waiting to happen? It seems One Direction's former mop-top Harry Styles, already known when he sings, "Just stop your crying, it's a sign of the times." If you're a reasonably wealthy landowner on the Isle of Wight, chances are you're in luck. That heap of mud, pile of discarded Stella Artois cans and cow dung you're sitting on could potentially be a pot of property gold. More and more of the island is being flogged to hungry property developers in sharp suits with clever catchphrases and a lot of cash. They are all looking to invest in new built housing estates. Every time I stroll into town, I am struck by the large number of posters and advertisements for new properties, complete with full planning permission just waiting to happen. Excuse me while I bore you with my moaning, whining and ranting, but I don't think this is right, and I'll tell you why. You see, the Isle of Wight is very small, roughly 146.80 square miles, but very proud and beautiful jewel in the sea. It's a tourist haven, attracting thousands of people every summer, with its green and gold fields, beautiful beaches, and warm thatched pubs in sleepy, enchanting villages surrounded by rolling hills. It's a peaceful place of natural beauty, with a relaxed way of life. So surely the last thing visitors want to see is a plethora of cheap housing where there were once luscious landscapes. These developments are ruining in the backdrop of the perfect family photograph. The more cheap housing built, the more it tarnishes the island's attraction and appeal. I do, however, realise more housing needs to be built to keep up with demand. These days it's probably far easier for young families to horseback their way to the moon on a unicorn than it is to get onto the property ladder. The initial costs of property buying ranges from £17,000 to £22,000, including deposit and extra fees. So by building more properties, people have more opportunity to buy their first home. But one very important thing to consider is the build quality, so be wary. While these new homes may look smart, you may end up paying out more money in the long term if the poorly fitted roof causes a leak or your boiler fails. Perhaps I need to take my head out of the sand, because as the island's population and house prices continue to rise, so too will demand for these type of developments. It's the modern world we live in. The cheaper the better, apparently. Perhaps Harry was right. Maybe I need to stop crying. After all, it's a sign of the times.
And on to entertainments. There is Jazz at the Apollo. Newport Jazz Club presents from Australia the sensational jazz vocalist Nicola Milan with Tony Woods and the Phoenix Trio on Sunday, August the 20th, 2017, from 3 p.m. to 5:30. Tickets priced at £12 with £5 for students, obtainable from 730601 or 523879, telephone numbers, and on the door if available, at the Apollo Theatre in Pyle Street, Newport.
There's a new team. This is an article by Mal Butler. A new team of 3 clergy will take charge of 6 Church of England parishes around Sandown Bay. The team will be given the freedom to create a new vision for ministry and mission in the area. The Reverend Mark Williams, who is currently curate at St Mary's Church, Porchester, will become priest in charge of St Paul's, Shanklin, and Christ Church, Sandown, and will be licensed by the Bishop of Portsmouth on August the 20th. He said, "I actually preached in Christ Church on Vacation Sunday in May 2016. I had a sense this was where I was called to be, but I was still only a second-year curate. But by the time the job was advertised, I was coming towards the end of my curacy. It will be the start of a new season at St Paul's and Christ Church, and I want to get to know the parishes first. It will be a good work as part of a team." Father David Lawrence March, who is currently chaplain at Ardingly College near Haywards Heath, will become priest in charge of St Saviour on the Cliff, Shanklin, and Church of the Good Shepherd Lake, and had never been to the island before May. Father David said, "Of course, there is an element of trepidation, not least as it will entail a move back in parochial ministry after 25 years of chaplaincy in schools in both the maintained and independent sectors. I look forward enormously, not only to the challenges ahead, but also to getting to know the people and clergy of the diocese, and ask for your prayers for all of us at the Good Shepherd and St Saviour's." They will be joined by Reverend Terry Wilk as priest in charge of St Blasius, Shanklin, and St John's, Sandown. Terry is currently chaplain at the Diocesan College in Cape Town, South Africa. He was born and brought up in Soweto and served in the South African Navy and then trained and worked as a teacher.
Singing group looking for new members. Island singing group sounds lively, are seeking new members. There are no auditions and the only requirement is enthusiasm. The weekly sessions are led by Maggie O'Connor, a natural voice practitioner. Sounds Lively, which has a mix of a cappella world music and British folk songs, began as part of Healing Arts, and despite losing its funding during NHS cuts, members have carried on singing. The group participates in charity concerts and music festivals, both on the island and the mainland. Sounds Lively meet on Wednesdays between 1:30pm and 3:30pm during term time at the Unitarian Hall, High Street, Newport. The new term starts on September 6th. Email Ali on hallially@hotmail.co.uk for more details.
While we're on the subject of singing, there's a free 6-week singing course for men entitled Learn to Sing in Harmony. It starts on Thursday, September the 14th at Wootton Methodist Church at 7:30pm. The course is sponsored by Wight Harmony Chorus, and for details phone 07786 494 751.
County Press Shop has available event programmes for Bus, Beer and Walks weekend, 14th and 15th of October. This includes timetables, route maps and special offers.
And also, for people interested in local history who would like to find out more about how Newport developed into the town it is today, a special event is planned next week. The newly formed Friends of Lord Louis Library has worked with library staff to come up with a short walk around the centre of Newport, accompanied by illustrations of the town from Victorian times till today. The circular walk starts at the library at 5pm on Thursday, August the 17th, and will return to the library at around 6:30pm when refreshments will be served. There is no charge for the walk, but donations towards the Friends of Lord Louis Library will be very welcome. There is no need to book, but numbers are restricted to 25, so walkers are asked to arrive promptly to avoid disappointment.
Lots for classic fans to savour. There's still lots to celebrate for the West Wight Arts Association as members look forward to the new season. The organisation is celebrating its 70th year as it was founded in 1947. Last season was highly successful, with audiences in the Memorial Hall Freshwater averaging 175 at the 8 concerts, with more than 100 season ticket holders. The new season kicks off on September the 16th with the Ducasse Trio, an unusual combination of violin, piano and clarinet, playing works by Bartók, Stravinsky and Gershwin, among others. The winner of the BBC Young Musician of the Year in 2016, cellist Sheku Kane-Mason, comes on October the 14th with his sister Izata as pianist. This concert is likely to sell out very quickly, so book early. The Castalian string quartet and pianist Michael Dusek will play works by Haydn, Dutilleux and Schumann on November the 11th, and the Christmas concert on the December 9th will be by award-winning viola player Timothy Ridout with Frank Dupree on the piano. In 2018, the Romanian pianist Alexandra Dariescu will make a welcome return on January 13th, and guitarist Sean Shibi will give a recital on February 10th. World-famous pianist Peter Donahoe returns on March 10th, and the season ends on April 7th with baritone Nicholas Mogg and pianist James Coleman performing Bernstein, Vaughan Williams and Schubert. Tickets are available from the association's website or phone 756028 from Monday. And that's all we have for today, so it's goodbye from Sinara.
Good night from Barry, and we all wish you a very happy, enjoyable weekend. Thank you.
This is the BBC. This is In Touch, the magazine programme for people like me who are blind or partially sighted. I'm Peter Wight. Thanks for downloading this extended edition. Good evening. Tonight, the rules which give you the right to personal information about your health in a form you can actually read. But are those rules working? You put your questions directly to NHS England. And from full sight to no sight in 72 hours, how the simplest task can turn into an ergonomic nightmare.
Initially standing on the scales, I sigh, as there is no way I can see my feet, let alone the screen beneath them.
More of Vanessa's story later in the programme. But first, until a year ago, if you wanted to be sure of getting personal information from the NHS, such as appointments, test results, advice about treatment, in a form you could read yourself, you had to rely on goodwill. Some people's experience suggests you still do, but there is now something called the Accessible Information Standard, which means that if they can't provide it to you in braille, email or text message, or another form you need to use to get information, then you have the law on your side. It's now a year down the track, and there's a report out looking at how well the NHS and other care services covered by the standard are doing. We also asked you for your experiences over that past year. Well, I've been sharing those with Olivia Butterworth, Head of Public Voice for NHS England. She began, though, by telling me what their report had found.
One of the fundamental pieces that came out of the review that then was picked up by the Care Quality Commission, so the national body that monitors the quality of care and health services, who've included the standard in their equality objectives, which means that every provider that they inspect will also have their inspection inspected against the standard. So if a GP practice isn't compliant with the standard, they would need to be able to demonstrate how they are going to become compliant when they're CQC inspected.
So are these results better or worse than you expected?
I think they're about what we expected. So we know that everybody thinks the standard is the right thing to do. And we know that where it is being implemented, it's making a massive difference for people. So simple things like getting a text, getting an email, but we've still got lots of places where people don't think they're allowed to email, people don't think they're allowed to test.
And why do they think that? I mean, we'll come to it with some of the queries that we've had, but it just seems incomprehensible to me. Everyone's emailing, it seems, except the NHS.
So I think it's about changing practice, and the NHS is a guardian of people's health information. It has to be done properly and it has to be done appropriately. And you know, listeners will be aware that there was a big issue with a data breach earlier in the year, which caused havoc with email systems. So it is about doing it appropriately and in the right way, but allowing people to see what's possible.
So can I ask you how formats other than email or text, which really should be quite simple, how are they being produced? Are they being produced in-house? How does it actually happen?
Local organisations, so a GP practice would need to make an arrangement with a local provider or not a local provider, any provider of Braille, in order that they can make sure that they can access that.
And who pays for it?
So the local system, so CCGs have the budget that they allocate to different providers for different services, and it's no different to producing a written piece of paper. Ultimately, the standard should save money because texts and emails have a much lower cost to them than a written letter that goes out in the post with a stamp on it.
Right, we asked our listeners how it was going for them, and we've heard from some people. Jenna Mystery got in touch. She said, "When I've seen my specialist doctor, he claimed not to know anything about providing information. He then sent it to me in a format that I couldn't read. Even with the dentist, I have to push to get an appointment by text. I don't understand why this is. The standards aren't being put into practice." What's your advice to Jenna?
My advice to Jenna would be that there will be a communications lead or a PALS officer in the trust where she's seen her specialist, and I would raise it with them. In NHS trusts, there is usually a patient liaison advice person. In your practice, it might be your practice manager. There are also patient participation groups. There is your local health watch. But I think it is about making sure that we are telling people that this isn't being complied with and now we need to do something with it.
OK. Also on the line, we have Sue Hinks who got in touch. Sue, do you want to put your own question directly to Olivia?
Yes, hello Olivia. I'm having a little difficulty with my local doctor's surgery. It's written on my notes that I would like email, text, braille, phone call, but they don't seem to be acting upon it. So what I did, I contacted NHS England and they have put a complaint into my local surgery practice manager and just wait for a result. They have it on my notes, though. This is the frustrating thing. They're aware. And the excuse I get, I call it an excuse. Oh, who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay for the email? Oh, we can't translate blood test results into Word or anything. We can't do that kind of thing.
OK, so on the first point, if it's on your notes, it should be acted upon. And there should be a flag on your notes that say you have a communication need. So I would say
print letters for blood test results and print letters for appointments, etc.
So I think there's always something about helping people to do things differently that they haven't done before. So for a sighted person, actually the concept of putting something onto a Word document, well, that's just another printed document, isn't it? So helping people to understand and explaining, if you email it to me on a Word document, my screen reader can read me my letter without anybody else being involved, so it protects my privacy. Helping people to understand those things often helps them to realise how important it is for them to work differently. So your GP practice will also have a patient participation group, and I think there's many patient participation groups that have had big discussions about the standard and how that should be complied with within their practice, and they've taken on an awareness raising role within the practice, because it's often not just the clinician, it's also the practice manager and the reception staff who need to know as much about this as they possibly can. Insofar as contacting NHS England, I think we have a standard 20-day response turnaround for issues that come in through the customer contact centre, but I'd be really happy to make sure we pick this up outside of this call, Sue, to make sure that you are going to get a response.
Sue, I gather you have had some pluses.
Yes, I have had some pluses. The first plus is that when I go to the local hospital to do with ear care, I do get an email for the appointment. And on another plus side, I recently attended expert diabetes course. I actually got the information I needed to follow the course in Braille.
So,
That's
Olivia,
perfect.
that's cheering,
So
presumably,
now
for
we have
you.
to make that happen in all of your healthcare services.
OK. Sue Hinks, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much.
One more for you. Hazel Darvell got in touch and she said,
Since 2011, I have been battling with my NHS Trust for accessible information. In my case, email. During this time, they've had a major upgrade to their computer system, but failed to incorporate flagging up alternative formats. Even now that it's law, things have not changed very much. After visiting a clinic and booking another appointment, they've automatically given me this appointment via printed letter, which I then tore up and gave back to them, telling them to look in my file. I fully intend to take matters further if this continues.
What's your reaction and how should she take it further?
I think the normal process of going through the complaints route of providers is really helpful. I know people don't like to complain, but it's really helpful because then it means that people can be monitoring what complaints are coming in. So if there are a lot of complaints coming into a trust around the standard, then they can start to take more action and take that really seriously, because all those complaints should be reported up to their trust board. I think there's something about the training for frontline receptionist, clerical, administrative staff. You know, if they haven't been trained, how would they know? So again, providers should be making sure that their staff have an awareness that this is important.
Is this now enshrined in law?
So all information standards are enshrined in law. So therefore, as an information standard, the accessible information standard is then legally enforceable. So ultimately, if you go through the complaints route, you might want to take it to your local health watch. They're really keen at the moment to make sure that they're building up evidence of where this is not working and where it is working. And then it would ultimately potentially end up with a legal complaint being filed.
Olivia Butterworth, and we'd like more of your evidence as well on this to give us a wider perspective of what's actually going on, whether it's positive or negative. One of the areas I think we struggle with on In Touch is conveying what it's like to lose your sight, gradually or suddenly. As a rule, by the time people feel like talking to us about it, they've processed it or rationalised some of the rawness out of it and are now more concerned with solving the challenges life is throwing at them. But Vanessa Potter's situation is rather different. When she lost her sight suddenly as the result of a rare disease which attacks the nerves of the brain and then gradually began to recover some of that sight, she kept an audio diary which she has now pulled together into a book. Significantly, she called it Patient H69 to highlight the impersonal way in which she felt she was often treated during the process. Well, she's been telling me about her experience, and she first described the storm of symptoms which hit her out of the blue.
It all happened within 72 hours. I lost my sight completely, so that was absolutely no light response at all. And I was paralysed, so I basically had no sensory responses.
So lots was happening to you, as you say. You lost feeling in your feet, your legs, your hand. Why was the focus when you wrote this book so much on eyesight? Because that's how it feels.
That's interesting, actually. Because I do try and talk about all of my sensory loss, because of course it's all so interrelated. I know at one stage, because I couldn't see, but also because I couldn't feel the world, I remember asking someone, am I still here? Because I was so disorientated. My body, the normal signals and data you get to orientate yourself, I didn't have two of those major channels. So it was very strange, but I suppose I do write a lot about the vision.
Yes, I don't think it's me. I don't think it's because we're a programme for visually impaired people. You keep coming back to the question of vision. You do say at one point, I'd kind of forgotten about me feet, what was happening to other parts of my body.
Yeah, the visual side was the biggest impact for me, for sure. I had a visual career, so I suppose that's why that hit me the hardest. And of course, I realised then how much we use, and I'd used my sight to get around, and you have to adapt very quickly.
And you don't think this is retrospective at all on the visual side, because it's more dramatic? You are writing a book and selling a book after all.
Well, actually, I don't have to be retrospective because I recorded everything. I got people, my friends and family in the hospital to do a diary from the very first day, so a lot of what I wrote came from that.
And that is fascinating as you describe it as you go along. Now, your sight went gradually in the sense that you aren't one of those people who woke up in the morning and couldn't see a damn thing, but it went gradually over that 72 hours, and it was in hospital where you woke up one morning and more or less could see nothing. Can you just explain what that was like?
Yeah, that was strange. For the last little bit of sight to go, I almost didn't realise, because it was a halo that was getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and it had this brown, misty sort of fog over everything. And then it wasn't until actually I was kind of moved from a room inside to outside that there's this, I know there should have been some light shift, and there was none. And that's when I realised that it was completely black, not just dark greys, but black.
And that's presumably what you'd been fearing the previous couple of days.
Absolutely. It was a runaway train where everyone was hoping that it would stop and that the vision would, stop deteriorating, but it didn't.
Now, you were reassured fairly quickly. People did say this is unlikely to be permanent. In your state, how easy was this to believe?
I believed it because I absolutely needed to believe it. I suppose I'm quite a positive person. If somebody gives me something positive to hang on to, I grab it. So I desperately wanted it to be true. I didn't want to lose my vision. It was my career, my job. So, yeah, I hung on to that.
The sense you get as a reader, I've been reading this over the last couple of days, is that you felt alone. I mean, you had a lot of people with you. You had your husband, you had a lot of other people, and of course you had the medical staff. But the sense is that you didn't feel you were being heard and taken seriously.
I felt very alone and very frightened. Fear is an isolating thing. And when you're suffering, severe anxiety, I think by nature that tends to separate you from people around you. Even though they desperately want to connect, you disconnect. It's kind of a survival mechanism, I suppose. And I found myself using lots of meditation, and that, I suppose, took me away from them as well.
Can you give examples? I'm not thinking so much now of Ed, your husband. They were clearly very, very concerned about you. But, with the medical staff, there's this idea of not being heard.
Well, I suppose I wanted them to find answers. And this was an interesting thing for me. I'd always assumed hospital doctors, they know what's wrong, they'll cure you, they sort things out. And this was a time when they couldn't. And everybody was scratching their head. And that was very frightening because I wanted them to find the answer. And every single time they came back with a test result, it was like, it's not that, it's not this.
One of the things that a lot of In Touch listeners say, and I've experienced myself, is the fact that quite often they don't seem to know what you can and can't see, and they don't always necessarily believe you either.
Oh, I had this such a lot. I did have a battle with one particular doctor because he was asking ridiculous questions to somebody who just lost their sight. And
such as?
Come and walk behind me down this corridor and read this chart. Well, I was paralysed and pretty much legally blind, so that was impossible. They were very confused about what vision I got back. Nobody could answer those questions. Why is it grey and wispy? Why can't I see faces? Nobody knew.
Mm. And of course, presumably when they asked you to look at the scale, you probably couldn't see the wall.
No. But what was strange is that I could start to see contrast. So I might see the edge of the wall between a dark and a light patch. That was very frustrating. I could see odd corners and lines, but no, not the chart that they were pointing at.
What is really quite fascinating in the book is not so much the sight going, which of course is dramatic, but the sight beginning to come back, because that's when you're trying to describe it. Can you give me a sense of what that was like?
Well, I describe that as landing on a crazy mad planet because it was somewhere I had never been before visually.
Because things didn't look the same as you remembered them, or as they ought to be.
They didn't look like anything. I didn't even use the word seeing because I felt like I was sensing the world. It was just this grey, wispy, floaty, thin place. In fact, I described it as looking through an X-ray. Everything was black and white, thin lines, no faces, no detail, one-dimensional, no colour. It was the most bizarre place and I didn't recognise it.
Tell me about the balloon.
Oh, the balloon, yes. Well, my behaviour, I think, was a little bit erratic because every time I could see anything, I'd yell to be pushed in my wheelchair, let me go see that, let me go see that. And we went past, we were outside and we went past some balloons and suddenly I got a shape. And so I grabbed these balloons and I clutched them. They were child's balloons. I didn't know that. I'd taken some child's balloons and I started for the very first time to see just a hint of colour, something that I thought might be colour, and that was very exciting.
It was striking that at the point when your sight was beginning to come back and people started to talk about you getting out and going home, you didn't actually want to at that point, did you?
No, it was this kind of surreal experience, and I kind of had this association that the experience had to end in the hospital, and when I went home I was magically better again and my life was back and life was normal. So to go home, with a walking stick, hardly able to walk, I couldn't see anything properly, I didn't want to do that. No. You
wanted it fixed?
I did. I wanted to be fixed, yes.
And I think we haven't talked much about your children yet, but I think you didn't want them to see you in this kind of state you were in either.
No, I suppose that's the protectiveness of a parent. You don't want to frighten your children. And actually, I was so wrong because the children are incredibly resilient and they just did everything right. They just, they accepted it and they just totally got on with it.
You should explain, they were very young at the time, weren't they? They were about 5 and 2?
Yeah, that's right, 2.5. And my daughter had just turned 5. In fact, I went blind on her birthday.
Right. And they sort of clambered over you. They didn't treat you like porcelain, did they?
No, they did everything right. They just came and hugged me. They seemed to know intuitively, did children, that when I needed that physical contact and reassurance, it actually came from them. I didn't reassure them. They reassured me. They were amazing.
You had to perform certain tasks before you could go home. There's the very English tea-making test. What did that test reveal to you? What was it about?
That test, well, this is the get out of jail card. So if you want to leave prison, hospital, when you have just gone blind, you have to pass a test, and that is you have to make a cup of tea, which of course was an act that was incredibly easy before all this. But I struggled with that enormously. It took me about 20 minutes finding the mug and boiling water. Hot water is terrifying when you can't see. And pouring it and bending down. And I suddenly realised what an enormous uphill battle I had. That was, quite an experience.
And this is presumably all about how much care you're going to need and how much you're going to cost to look after you when you go home. That's the implication, isn't it?
I suppose it is. It's also to prove that you can function. I also had to walk down a staircase, which actually I think was more frightening because it was like Indiana Jones putting your foot out and hoping there was a step below.
Now, once you were at home and your sight was slowly coming back by this point and you'd passed the T-test, was familiarity a help or a hindrance?
It was definitely a help. And being in my own space and environment was great. Yes, so familiarity was great about bringing my vision back online, in that I would look at something and know what it was and that would help me see it. But then sometimes testing myself with unfamiliar objects was also good.
I said a hindrance because I just wondered whether, because at home it would be even more distressing for things not to look the way they ought to have looked. And I guess there were other people perhaps involved at this point, poking about, moving things, all that sort of thing.
Well, the funny thing is they used to move everything out my way so that I had a clear path, because, of course, I was walking with a walking stick because of the paralysis. And you can only do that for so long with two tiny children. So whilst they were trying to clear the way, there would be dolls in the way and toy cars. And so actually it was a bit of an obstacle course. And that was great because it did test me all the time. So it was kind of good and bad at the same time.
You were desperate to do normal things that then wouldn't work the way that you would have done them. There's a story that I particularly enjoyed about how you wanted to weigh yourself. Could you perhaps read us an extract?
I decide it's time to know how much weight I have lost. However, in order to read the glass scales that I prod tentatively with my toe, I realise I will have to employ some daring tactics. Initially standing on the scales, I sigh, as there is no way I can see my feet, let alone the screen beneath them. Stepping on again, I attempt to lower myself to the floor, but I am slow and the electronic dial soon flicks off. Forcing rubbery legs to kneel, and with my nose just centimetres from the dial, I press the scales again and can almost make out one faint digit. Exhaustion overwhelms me, and for a moment my head slumps onto the glass. As I lie there feeling utterly hopeless, my nose suddenly twitches. The scales smell of talc. Yet as far as I know, no one in our house uses it. This pleasant yet alien smell galvanises me into action. I decide I want my house free from the strange bodies that inhabit it. I want my life back, and that means finding a way to overcome this challenge. Experimenting again, I work out that after pressing the scales, I have around 3 seconds to read the dial. This exercise will require speed. Thankful for once that the house is empty and my family are unaware of my circus antics, I practised an inelegant hop-off technique. But I am just not fast enough. Unfortunately, I need to hold the wall for support, and that slows me down. I try kneeling my weight on the scale, but that only results in me headbutting the toilet bowl. Tumbling is taking on a whole new meaning in our upstairs bathroom. All dignity now lost, I crash to the floor in a magnificent bungee-style descent that leaves me spread-eagled, but able to just glimpse the numbers before they blink off.
I think some people will say, why are you talking to Vanessa? You know, she was only blind for a few days. You know, what's the connection? But what I found interesting was how many things you began to get a sense of that blind people would be very familiar with. And one of them was the sense of kind of rage almost when things don't do what you want to do. I mean, you couldn't get the remote to work on your TV.
Yeah, absolutely. I had utter frustration that things that were so easy, like the making the tea, things that I'd totally taken for granted now were seemingly impossible. And actually, I had to learn to do them in different ways.
Losing sight is often portrayed as one of the worst things that can happen to you physically. I have to say, much to the irritation of some people who've been blind most of their lives. Now you've experienced it, is that still true for you?
Oh, that's interesting. It was a terrifying experience, I can't say it wasn't, but it's probably made me more empathetic. I mean, I don't have full sight now, so I live in a world with visual disturbances. So whilst, of course, I'm not blind, I understand more things now, and I'm perhaps more intuitive of maybe other people around me. I'm forever photographing steps when they don't have good boundaries on them. I photograph loo signs everywhere that you can't see. I found myself getting irritated, actually, about those things now, things that I would never have noticed before.
But the surveys that are done and often quoted, they do use the word terrifying. They use the word, it's the thing people fear most. How would you feel if it were to happen again? Would you still be scared?
Absolutely. There's no way I wouldn't be. Yes, it was terrifying then. It would be terrifying again. But I think I would have some coping mechanisms if it happened again. Things that actually I know I can get through it, and I know actually your body adjusts so quickly. I didn't think about things like that, and that's a reassurance that actually your body takes over and helps you.
We should say that what affected you is extremely rare, and that you have made not a complete recovery, but really quite a considerable recovery. But you've been interested in, obviously, what happened to you. What have you found out?
Yeah, I actually experienced NMO, which is an autoimmune neurological condition, which very few people know anything about. But when I had all the strange things happen during my sight recovery, where blues would sparkle, I got so curious that I really, really wanted to understand what was going on inside my brain.
And, I mean, because clearly at the time, it was quite a while before the doctors figured out what it was.
Yeah, and I'm not a classic case either. It did take them a couple of weeks to give me any form of diagnosis.
And was it unusual that you actually did begin to recover quite quickly?
Well, people have different reactions with NMO. They called mine a catastrophic episode because basically it was pretty horrendous because I lost the sight in both eyes, which is quite unusual, and completely. So I had it in quite an extreme way, plus the paralysis. I did recover, but not everybody does from NMO.
One of your great fears at the beginning of this was your job, because it was so much about sight and colour. Where are you now, and have you gone back to doing the same thing?
So I was a TV producer by trade. I made TV commercials, mostly the ones that people fast forward through. No, this actual whole experience has become a springboard to a brand new career, which is writing and working on science art projects, which has all come on the back of the book.
So are you going to tell us that it was a good thing, really?
It's a thing I made into a positive experience. No, it's never. I'd never say a tragedy is a good thing, because it was catastrophic. But I made a choice to get something out of it. I figured if it was taking something away, it was going to give me something back. And it certainly has. I mean, I've written a book and done a TED Talk, so I'm not complaining that I've had incredible experiences on the back of what was a horrible experience.
Vanessa Potter. And Vanessa's reading of her own book is available to buy and download online. There are print and ebook versions as well. We're always glad of your responses. You can call our action line on 0800 044 044 for 24 hours after the programme, or you can email intouch@bbc.co.uk. From me, Peter Wight, producer Lee Kumatat, and the team, goodbye.